They took $100,000 from my account. We thought you'd understand. I smiled. But, my name is Angela, and if you had told me 3 years ago that I would one day look into my own sister's eyes and feel nothing, I would have called you crazy. But on that afternoon, standing in my own kitchen, watching my sister and my brother-in-law smile as if nothing had happened, I realized something terrifying. They didn't feel guilty, not even a little. They had just taken $100,000 from my personal savings account, money I had worked for, sacrificed for, saved quietly over decades. And when I confronted them, do you know what my sister said? "We thought you'd understand, Angie. You've always been the one who helps." She said it like I'd lent her $20, like she hadn't wiped me out, like it was nothing. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I smiled, because in that exact moment, I made a decision. I would not raise my voice. I would not demand it back. I would watch. I would learn. And then, I would take back everything they owed me, and more. But to understand how I got there, you need to know how this all began. You need to know how I was raised to sacrifice everything for family, how I spent years giving and giving, until there was nothing left of me, not even the woman I used to be. And maybe, just maybe, you'll understand why, in the end, I had to burn the bridge. If you were in my shoes, would you have stayed calm? Or burned everything down? Let me know in the comments before we continue. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Because trust me, this one isn't over yet. I've always been the one they called the reliable one. Growing up, that meant I was the child who stayed quiet when things got chaotic. The one who cleared the dishes while everyone else was arguing in the living room. The one who didn't ask for much, who made space for everyone else. And as I got older, it never really changed. When our parents passed, it wasn't even a discussion. I became the one responsible for everything, handling the estate, making sure Rachel was okay, taking care of the old bills, making sure no one got left behind. Rachel, my younger sister, was always the wild one, but sweet, charming, and constantly in trouble. When she got pregnant at 22, I helped her set up the nursery. When she dropped out of college to marry Mark, I told her love was more important than a degree, even though I had secretly saved to pay for her next semester. When Mark's business started struggling, I stepped in again, quietly. It started with small things, a few $100s here and there. Then the mortgage was due. Then the car broke down. "We'll pay you back, Angie," they always said. "You know you're like a second mother to us." I'd nod. I always nodded, because deep down, I believed them. But in my early 50s, something shifted. I started to feel invisible. I had no partner. My marriage had ended 10 years earlier, and I never dated again. I lived alone in a modest house and worked at the same insurance agency for over 2 decades. My colleagues were younger and busier, and I had slowly become the person no one invited out after work. And the family? They still called, but only when they needed something. One morning, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea, looking out the window. The sun was rising, the sky glowing orange, and all I could think was, is this it? Is this what I gave everything up for? The next week, Rachel called, not to check on me, but to ask if I could pick up the kids from school again. I agreed, of course, but something inside me hesitated. That hesitation turned into full-blown unease when I logged into my online bank account a few days later to transfer money into a CD I'd been building for retirement. I blinked, refreshed the page, blinked again. A withdrawal of $25,000 had been made the week before. Another one, $40,000, 2 weeks earlier. Smaller ones before that. I opened the transaction details. The money had been transferred to an account under the name Rachel and Mark Family Ventures, LLC. I felt my stomach turn. I knew that name. It was the LLC they'd created for Mark's latest business idea, a food truck venture that never even launched. I frantically went through the account history. It wasn't just a one-time thing. Over the course of 6 weeks, a total of $100,000 had vanished from my savings. The notes next to each transaction said, "Family support, authorized." I hadn't authorized a thing. I sat frozen at the kitchen table for over an hour. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the numbers on the screen and felt my hands go cold. I wanted so badly to believe it was a mistake. a technical glitch. Something, anything, other than what it looked like. But deep down, I knew. I remembered the financial binder I'd made when we were dealing with Mom's estate years ago. I had shared some passwords with Rachel back then, including my bank info, so we could handle things faster. I had never changed them, because I trusted her. And she had used that trust to wipe me out. I didn't confront Rachel right away. I wish I could say I stormed into her house and demanded answers. But that's not who I am. That's never been who I am. Instead, I sat in silence for 3 days. I barely ate, barely slept. I went to work and smiled when people passed my desk, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. Everything felt muffled. The betrayal wasn't just about the money. It was what the money represented. I had spent most of my life giving time, giving support, giving up things I wanted so others could have what they needed. And now, the very people I had protected had stolen from me. That word, stolen, I didn't want to believe it. I needed to be sure. So I started digging. I pulled out the old estate binder I'd used years ago and flipped through every page. At the very back, taped inside a folder, was the handwritten password sheet I had made for Rachel when we were both managing our parents' final bills. My old bank login was right there, still the same. I opened my email archive and searched for anything from Rachel. Dozens of threads came up. One in particular caught my eye. A message from 5 months earlier with the subject line, "Do you mind?" The body said, "Hey sis, would it be okay if I moved some of the savings into Mark's account for a few weeks? Just to keep the bank from closing the business. We're trying to get a loan and need the statement to look good. I'll put it right back. Promise." I had never replied. In fact, I barely remembered reading it. I probably skimmed it during work and thought, they wouldn't do that without my okay, right? Apparently, wrong. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through more emails, more text messages. I found one Rachel had sent to Mark that she'd accidentally forwarded to me months ago. I hadn't noticed it at the time. It read, "Angie's never going to use that money. She's basically retired already. She'd want us to have it. She'd want us to have it. Like I was dead. Like I was just a ghost with a bank account." That night, I sat in my living room in the dark. No TV, no music, just me, and the sound of my own breathing, uneven, shallow. I looked around at everything I had worked for, the framed diplomas, the carefully polished furniture, the little house I had poured decades into maintaining. All of it felt exposed, vulnerable. They had walked into my life and taken what they wanted, and they hadn't even asked. The next day, I called my bank. I confirmed that the transfers had been made using my login credentials. Because the logins were valid and authorized, there was no fraud claim to be made. My money was gone. I remember thanking the customer service rep. Can you believe that? Thanking her for confirming that I had no recourse. Then I hung up the phone. I sat very still. And for the first time since my divorce, I felt a deep, bone-level rage. It was quiet at first, like a pressure under the skin. But then it started growing, spreading, and that's when I decided I wouldn't ask for the money back. I wouldn't call Rachel. I wouldn't cry to her. I wouldn't plead. I was going to get even, but not by stealing, not by shouting, by making sure that Rachel and Mark learned the one lesson they had never been taught. What happens when the one person who always says yes finally says no? The strangest part about being betrayed by someone you love is how quiet the pain is. It doesn't come like an explosion. It doesn't slam into you like a truck. It seeps in, slowly, like water rising through the cracks of a floor you thought was solid. That week, I didn't tell a soul. Not my coworkers. Not the neighbor I walk with on Sundays. Not even Marlene, my oldest friend from college. The one person who always knew when something was wrong. I couldn't speak it out loud, because saying it would make it real. I kept playing it back in my head. Not just the money, but the history. Every birthday party I had helped plan for Rachel's kids. Every time I drove across town to drop off groceries when they were struggling. Every sleepless night when she'd call me crying because Mark had another idea that she couldn't stop him from chasing. And through it all, I had always been there. The safety net. I started remembering the sacrifices. How I'd put off buying my own place for 5 years because I was helping them with their second mortgage. How I skipped a trip to Italy I had saved for in my 40s because their car broke down, and they couldn't survive without it. How I sold our mother's jewelry to help cover the down payment on their new house. The house where I was now barely even welcome. I had done everything right. I had been good, loyal, generous. And they had seen me not as a sister, not as a person, but as a resource, a backup plan, a walking ATM. I was driving home from work one evening, stuck in traffic, when it hit me. They never even apologized. Not once. Rachel had said, "We thought you'd understand," as if this was some inevitable truth, as if her betrayal was my responsibility to absorb, because I'd always absorbed everything for her. I pulled over into a parking lot and just sat there. My heart was racing, and I realized I hadn't taken a deep breath in over a minute. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly I could see the white of my knuckles. And that's when I cried. Not just a few tears. I sobbed. The kind of crying that comes from someplace old. A pain that's been waiting years for permission to be heard. It wasn't just about the $100,000. It was about every time I put myself last. Every time I said, "Don't worry, I've got it." Every time I said yes, when I was screaming no inside. I thought about my ex-husband, how he used to tell me I was too nice, that I'd give until there was nothing left. I thought he was being cruel. Turns out, he was just the first one to notice what I had spent my whole life denying. I was a giver, and takers, they love women like me. When I finally got home that night, I took off my shoes at the door, walked into my bedroom, and sat down at the edge of the bed. There, in the quiet, with my cheeks still wet, I said something out loud that I had never said before. I deserve better. Not I want better. Not I wish things were different. But I deserve better. It felt strange, unfamiliar in my mouth, like trying on someone else's coat. But I said it again, and again, until the words no longer felt borrowed. That was the night I stopped mourning the money and started mourning the version of me who thought love meant sacrifice. Who believed that being a good sister meant saying yes to being used. That version of me. She was gone now, and in her place, something new was forming, quietly, carefully, without apology. I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but I knew this. I wasn't going to let them walk away with everything, not without a reckoning. The first step was simple: silence. I didn't call Rachel. I didn't demand answers. Instead, I smiled the next time she texted me. She asked if I could watch the kids the following weekend while she and Mark went to a business retreat. I said, of course. No problem at all. I was playing a role, and for once I was doing it on purpose. Because I had realized something. They expected me to explode. They expected me to confront them, demand the money back, threaten to go to the police, cut them off emotionally. They had already written that version of me in their heads. The angry, ungrateful sister who suddenly turned mean, and I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. No. I had something better in mind. While they were at their retreat, I sat at their kitchen table with the kids, watching cartoons and quietly going through the stack of mail that had piled up on the sideboard. It wasn't snooping. Not really. It was due diligence. And what I found? Gold. A stack of letters from banks, collection agencies, and a few denied credit applications. Apparently, Rachel and Mark's new venture, That Family LLC, had burned through not just my savings, but every penny they had. Worse, they had used my money to inflate their bank balance temporarily, get approved for a business loan, and were now behind on those payments too. They weren't just dishonest, they were drowning. That night I made a list. Not of people, of weaknesses. I knew how they operated. I had been close to them for years. I knew which friends they gossiped to. I knew which cousin Rachel complained about behind her back, but still called when she needed favors. I knew their schedules, their routines, even the fake image they tried to maintain online, that polished, filtered life they posted on Instagram while secretly begging me to cover bounced checks. I also knew they had told people I had offered them the money, that I was supporting the business. Lie number 1. So I made a plan. It wouldn't be fast. It wouldn't be loud. But it would be undeniable. The core of it was this. They wanted my money, but they needed my reputation. They used my trust to legitimize their choices. to convince lenders, family, friends that they were stable, supported, respectable. So I started dismantling that image, piece by piece, without ever raising my voice. What would you do if your own sister stole your life savings and expected you to stay quiet? Would you get revenge or walk away? Let me know in the comments below. I began by updating my will and financial power of attorney, removing Rachel entirely. Then I went to my old accountant, the one who used to help with our parents' estate, and I gave him everything: emails, transaction logs, copies of texts, bank statements. I didn't ask him to take action. I just asked him to document everything. Because one thing I had learned after 20 years in the insurance world: paper trails win wars. Next, I did something that even surprised me. I invited Rachel and Mark over for dinner. Yes, really. I smiled. I cooked. I asked about the kids. I pretended I hadn't just spent the last 2 weeks assembling a legal, emotional, and social weapon designed to collapse the house of cards they were living in. And when Rachel hugged me goodbye at the door and said, "See, I knew you'd come around," I hugged her back and said, "Of course, you're family." But what I meant was, "You've just made your last mistake." Because while they were laughing over dessert, I was already setting the trap. From the outside, everything looked the same. I still went to family dinners, still brought cookies to Rachel's kids on their birthdays, still laughed at Mark's stupid jokes. But inside, I was on fire. There's a strange kind of power in pretending, in being underestimated. Rachel thought I had gotten over it, that I'd forgiven them, that I had returned to my place, the older sister, the emotional cushion, the woman who bends and bends but never breaks. What she didn't see was that every smile I gave her now came with a hidden razor. Behind the scenes, I was slowly unraveling the world they'd built, not out of spite, but out of principle. They had stolen from me, lied to me, used me, and they had to learn that choices have consequences. The first real move I made? I sent one email. Just one. To the business loan officer at the bank that had financed their failed LLC. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I simply forwarded a very polite note with attached screenshots of the actual unauthorized transfers, along with a statement that read, "As someone listed as a source of personal capital in your records, I wanted to clarify that I did not authorize the use of my savings to secure this loan. Please update your file accordingly." No threats, no demands. Just a small, sharp clarification. I never heard back. But 2 weeks later, Rachel called me in a panic. "Angie, did you tell the bank you didn't approve the money for the business?" I paused, keeping my voice calm. "I didn't tell them anything. I just clarified the truth." Silence. "They froze the account," she finally said, her voice shaking. "They're reviewing the loan. Mark is furious." I feigned concern. "Oh no, that sounds serious." She didn't scream. She didn't confess. She just said, "You should have talked to us first." And that was the moment I realized she still didn't see what she had done wrong. She saw my truth as the betrayal, not her theft. That night, I sat at my desk and opened a new folder on my computer. I titled it simply, Reclamation. Over the next few weeks, I added to it copies of every transfer, emails with banks and legal consultants, a signed affidavit from my accountant documenting the misuse of funds, even text messages from Rachel hinting at how they stretched the truth a little to keep the business afloat. And while I built my silent case, I kept being exactly what they expected: kind, quiet, present. They never saw it coming. Rachel even asked me to co-sign a lease for a new storefront they wanted to open. "You're the only one with good credit," she said, laughing. I looked at her, right in the eyes, and smiled. "I'll think about it." Then I went home and sent an anonymous tip to the local business bureau, pointing out their mounting debts, unpaid contractors, and the discrepancy in their financial history. I knew someone would follow up eventually, and I knew Rachel would panic when they did, but I wasn't finished. The final move in my false calm phase was the most delicate. I invited my cousin Denise over for coffee. She's the one everyone in the family listens to, the unofficial news anchor of our relatives. I told her just enough. I didn't rant. I didn't cry. I told her facts. What Rachel and Mark had done, how they had framed it, what I had discovered, and how I hadn't told anyone, until now. And Denise, bless her, was horrified. Not dramatic, just disappointed. That quiet judgment that spreads like smoke. By the following weekend, I noticed it. People were different at family gatherings, colder toward Rachel, asking questions, watching her. The seeds had been planted, and I hadn't lifted a single weapon. I had simply allowed the truth to breathe. I thought I had seen the worst of them. I thought the theft, the sheer audacity of taking my life savings, was the bottom of the well. But I was wrong, because betrayal, when left unchecked, doesn't just end, it evolves. It grows legs. And sometimes, it smiles while it guts you. It was a Sunday afternoon, warm, quiet. I had just gotten home from the market when I saw I had a voicemail from an unknown number. I played it while unloading groceries, expecting spam. But what I heard made my blood run cold. "Hi, Angela. This is Lisa from Baker & Fields Realty. I'm just calling to confirm the co-ownership interest you mentioned in the 4th Street property paperwork. Your name isn't listed on the title, but since you said you helped with the down payment, we'll need written documentation for the tax filing." I dropped the bag I was holding. Oranges rolled across the kitchen floor. I hadn't said anything to anyone about the 4th Street property. Rachel and Mark had bought it 2 years ago. At the time, they told everyone they had saved up and got lucky with the market. But I knew the truth. I had given them $30,000 for the down payment. At the time, they said it was a loan. They even signed a napkin in front of me. Yes, a napkin. "We'll put it in writing next week," Mark had said. "This is just for now." That now never came, and I, stupidly, let it go. Hearing that voicemail confirmed what I had feared deep down but hadn't allowed myself to investigate. They were using me, still. Worse, they were using my name without my permission in some real estate transaction. I called the agent back immediately. Lisa was professional but cautious. "Rachel said you were involved in the funding, but that you preferred to remain off the paperwork. I assumed you were silent equity." Silent equity. That's what I had become in my own life. Invisible money. Quiet generosity. A woman erased. That night I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. But I did remember something I hadn't thought about in years. My mother, near the end of her life, once looked at me and said, "Angela, kindness is only kindness when it's given freely. If they expect it from you, it stops being love and becomes obligation." I hadn't understood it at the time, but now? It rang in my ears like a warning from the grave. Rachel and Mark weren't done with me. They were counting on my silence to keep building their empire of lies. I wasn't just the sister they'd used. I was the foundation of their illusions. And that's when I decided, no more chess pieces, no more passive resistance, no more watching. It was time to act. I went to my safe and pulled out the napkin, still folded, still signed. Rachel's handwriting, swirly and careless. Mark's, shaky and rushed. I scanned it, saved a copy, uploaded it to the folder titled Reclamation. Then I made 2 phone calls, one to an attorney and one to a reporter. Because if they wanted to play in the adult world of business and real estate, fine. But they were about to learn what happened when a woman they thought was weak stopped protecting them. They didn't just steal from me. They built their house on my back, and I was about to tear it down, brick by dishonest brick. I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted them to feel something they had never felt before, consequences. And the beauty of consequences is that when they're delivered quietly, people don't even realize they're falling until they hit the ground. I started with the attorney. Her name was Meredith, a calm, sharp woman in her 60s who had seen it all. Corporate fraud, family theft, inheritance wars. I gave her the file I had been building, the napkin, the bank records, the messages, the screenshots. She listened. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she looked at me and said, "They knew exactly what they were doing. And now, they're going to learn what it means to take from someone who documents everything." I didn't want a long court battle. I didn't want drama. I just wanted control back. So we drafted a formal demand letter. Legal, clear, non-negotiable. It stated that if the full amount, $100,000, was not repaid or reconciled with legal proof of intention within 30 days, I would pursue criminal charges for financial abuse and unauthorized use of personal funds. The letter also cited a formal breach of fiduciary responsibility, due to the past shared access to accounts during the estate process. And then I made my second move. Remember that reporter I mentioned? She worked for a local financial column, mostly covering personal stories of business fraud and family disputes. I didn't give her names. I told her I wanted to share a story, my story, of what happens when family trust becomes financial exploitation. The story ran the next Sunday. No names, no identifying details, but the people who needed to recognize themselves did. That same day, my cousin Denise called. "Rachel is losing it," she whispered. "She's convinced you're trying to ruin her. She says the bank's asking questions again, and the investor they were trying to impress pulled out." I simply said, "I haven't spoken to Rachel in weeks." And I hadn't, because that was part of the beauty of it all. I wasn't chasing revenge. I was just returning the truth to its rightful place. 3 weeks after the demand letter was sent, Mark showed up at my front door. Not Rachel, Mark. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Tie askew, dark circles under his eyes. He tried to laugh it off at first. "Come on, Angela. You know we never meant to hurt you. It was just a loan. Things got out of hand." I stood in the doorway, calm, grounded. "You took everything I had, and you never even asked." He looked down. "We were desperate." "No," I said. "You were entitled." He offered to start paying it back in small amounts. I told him that wasn't enough, because it never was about the money anymore. I wanted accountability, public, private, and personal. And I got it. The legal pressure spooked them enough to consult their own lawyer, who, I found out later, told them in no uncertain terms that if they didn't settle quickly and quietly, they would lose far more than just my savings. So they gave in. They sold the 4th Street property, at a loss, and returned the bulk of what they had taken. The final transfer arrived 2 months later. The money came with a note from Rachel, handwritten, tear-stained. "I hope one day you'll forgive us. I don't know how we became these people." I didn't reply, because I didn't need to. Forgiveness is something you give when someone has learned, when they've changed. But Rachel and Mark weren't sorry they betrayed me. They were sorry they got caught. And as for me, I took that money, and I didn't put it back into the same savings account. I used it to do something I had dreamed about since my 30s. I bought a small cottage on the coast, a place with sunlight in the mornings and silence at night, a place that was mine. No shared passwords, no surprise withdrawals, no one asking if I could just help. One more time, I left the city quietly. No goodbye party, no announcement. I just left. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. People always say that family is everything, and for a long time, I believed that. I believed that being a good sister meant sacrificing, that loving someone meant never drawing boundaries. That loyalty was more important than dignity. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is walk away, not to hurt, not to punish, but to protect what's left of yourself. When I moved into my new home by the coast, there was a moment I'll never forget. It was early morning. I was standing barefoot on the porch, holding a cup of tea, watching the fog roll in over the ocean, and for the first time in years, I felt still, not anxious, not responsible, not guilty, just still. And I whispered to myself, "This peace? I earned it." Because healing doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes you never get the apology. Sometimes they never understand what they did, but you still get to heal anyway. I'll always love my sister. I wish her well. I hope, truly, that she becomes someone better. But I will never again be the woman who sacrifices her own well-being to keep others comfortable. That version of me is gone. And in her place stands a woman who knows her worth, who knows that boundaries are not cruelty, they're protection, that silence is not weakness, it's strategy. And that revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living well. Have you ever had to let go of someone you loved to protect your peace? Have you ever been betrayed by someone you thought would never hurt you? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if this one touched your heart, share it. There's another woman out there who needs to hear it. Like, comment, and subscribe, because I have many more stories to tell. Stories of women who fell and rose stronger than ever. Because sometimes the best revenge is becoming someone they can never reach again.